Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop Fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
T2 Trainspotting is over. First, there's an opportunity. Then there is a betrayal.
Hello, Mark. So what you been up to for 20 years?
Choose life. Choose Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and hope that someone, somewhere cares.
Missed you, mate.
I missed you too, Spud. Choose looking up old flames, wishing you'd done it all differently.
Do you still take heroin?
No. And choose watching history repeat itself.
Hello, Franco. Simon, I'm home.
Choose your future.
Call the police.
What shall I say?
Just tell them we're dead.
Choose reality TV, slut-shaming, revenge porn. Choose a 0-hour contract, a 2-hour journey to work, and choose the same for your kids, only worse. And smother the pain with an unknown dose of an unknown drug made in somebody's kitchen. And then, take a deep breath.
All right, Andy, here we are. T2 Trainspotting. You hadn't seen it. I'm very excited to hear what you had to say.
Yeah, first, I just have to say, I still don't really get why they call this T2.
Yeah, I don't either. I even looked for it.
In the trivia on IMDb, which, people put this here, who knows if it's really right, but it says this. While announcing the sequel in an interview, director Danny Boyle joked that he wanted to call it T2 if James Cameron would allow it, whose film Terminator 2 Judgment Day is commonly abbreviated as T2. The cast later explained that the title was the one they thought the characters in the movie would have chosen just so they could annoy Cameron. Since Terminator 2 isn't legally known as T2, Boyle could use the title without permission. However, he settled for T2 Trainspotting because the internet search term T2 still led mostly to sites affiliated with Terminator 2. So,
yeah, I don't know how well that holds up.
Funny.
Like, it is funny, but even so, when I do a search for T2, it's actually neither of them. You know who really has the market is T2, an Australian tea shop chain, the Portland Timbers 2, that's Timbers 2, headed by Coach Shannon Murray, T2 Tennis, the flexible way to play. I get no movie. What do you get when you just search T2?
Okay, so I searched T2. I get T2T, the tea company. I get T2 Systems, parking management system. I get T2, the new public square. I get Audio Science Review, and then I get Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So I actually do get it, and much farther down my page, I actually do get T2 Trainspotting, but I get 2 Terminator 2 Judgment Day searches before Trainspotting comes up.
It goes first to T20 screwdrivers and T25 Torx bits before I get to anything related to movies. What have I been searching that it would so bork my...
You're clearly dealing with a lot of torque bits in your house.
I think says I'm with you. I don't understand the title either. I don't love it.
The way that they wrote it on screen when the title finally comes up in the film, I felt like, maybe it's like a platform, because it kind of has that look like they do on like train platforms or parking garages. It's kind of that block letter T2. I'm like, maybe that's what they're kind of implying. Like, I was like, maybe we're going to be at a T2 platform at some point in the film. We never were. So I guess to that end, I think it's funny that they thought the characters would think it annoyed James Cameron. That is kind of funny, but it's a little bit of a meta title to that end. And so, I don't know. I don't love it. I don't love it as a title.
Speaking of the adaptation, right, and I have not read the book. This is also, from what I understand, they massaged some of or a lot of the sequel or another book by Irving, what's his name? Porno, into this movie. So this movie, the first movie was based on Trainspotting. This movie is based on Trainspotting and Porno. That's how I understand. Is that fair?
Well, and I think quite a bit just kind of original. I think that they loosely pulled characters from those two stories, but I think you look at stuff in Porno that kind of relate to because what happens is that's 10 years later sequel, and you're following these characters as they kind of move out of the drug scene and get into the porn scene. And so what we're really left with from Porno is that Sick Boy is working to open up this massage parlor. Like, there is some of that element.
That's pretty much it
in there. And I think that's largely it. So,
okay.
I haven't read it. I haven't read either. But that's my understanding of the book.
Well, and given all that, it would make even less sense to call this Porno. I mean, there's precious little porno in this movie, and that would be a hard title to market, I think.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and since this movie came out, they actually repackaged the book Porno as Trainspotting, or as T2 Trainspotting. So. Oh,
that's interesting. All right.
Yeah. Well, get more copies sold off the shelves.
All right.
So, initial thoughts of the film, though. I mean, you had seen this before. Did you see this when it came out in theaters?
Yeah.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, there were pieces of it that I really connected to, but for me, the central story, which may or may not surprise you, is Spud's. That's the reason I love this movie, is because of Spud. It's not because of Renton. It's not because of Simon. It's not because of Begbie. I have lots of things to say about those characters, but for me, the arc of Spud, losing his family, dealing with his place in his journey of addiction, and writing down his memoirs and calling his memoir Trainspotting is a delightfully meta turn for this duo of movies that makes all of it make sense for me. And I just find a real connection to that.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a strong character. It was an interesting return to the core four men that we were following in that first film, and getting kind of a sense as to where they were, and seeing how they kind of took all of the elements that we had ended with in the last film, where Renton made off with all the money, Begbie ended up in jail, and seeing kind of what happened with Sick Boy and Spuds. It was interesting to see, okay, I can see that this is where things would be 20 years later. I buy into that. And so to that end, I felt like, you know what? Okay, they made some choices to kind of continue the story in a way that makes sense, and I enjoyed the return to them.
Yep, I agree.
Well, when this movie came out, it was no surprise. Rated R for drug use, language throughout, strong sexual content, graphic nudity, and some violence.
And some blackmail.
No dead babies, but surprising return of the toilets in a lot of different ways.
So many ways. So this one, it was interesting watching interviews with McGregor in particular, talking about what this movie means to him. Really, it's interesting to see these actors talking about their experience making a movie that previously they thought didn't need to be made, and feeling pretty strongly that they weren't interested in revisiting this character until they saw Hodges' script and said, okay, you found a way in that I never anticipated and was never interested in making. Did you at any point watching this movie, like, you didn't watch it when it first came out, and I'm curious if you fell in any way into that category, that it was not a movie that necessarily needed to be made, and so you deprioritized it in some way?
Well, I think that's exactly it. And I worked with somebody at the time who was very excited about the return to this world. And I was like, well, I guess, I wasn't really feeling like they needed a return to this world. And so I feel like perhaps my opinions of legacy sequels might have shifted a little bit, because I feel like in the last couple years, there have been some surprising legacy sequels that I'm like, you know what, maybe this isn't always a bad thing. Like when you see Blade Runner 2049, when you see Top Gun Maverick, these things where you're like, okay, if people come to it with the right intentions, I am kind of up for it. I think that there can be a lot of good returning to these worlds. We had in our pre-show chat for our members, we talked about some legacy sequels of films that, that would be an interesting film to do a legacy sequel to. And it's kind of an interesting conversation about the scope of legacy sequels. And yeah, when this came out, I don't feel like I was very interested in a return to the world of Trainspotting. I really enjoyed what Trainspotting did, and I just didn't think I needed more of it. I don't even know if I knew that Irvine Welsh had written Porno, so I don't know if it's not like I held, I was expecting that to be the movie, and I was like, oh, well, if that's the movie, I don't want to see it. It's not like that. I think I just felt like, okay, well, I don't know, maybe I'll rent it one day. It wasn't anything, as you said, I wasn't prioritizing.
I actually, for all the same reasons, I'm not sure why I prioritized it as something that I wanted to see. Maybe it was I feel like the first movie was important to a lot of people that I care about and trust, and so I should give this a shot. Maybe that was it. But I found my experience with the movie was really, really solid, with some areas that I feel like were questionable and actually linger in that space of why would this story be a part of this story? I struggle a little bit with what felt like hoops that they needed to jump through to make sure that all the characters end up in the same place. And that largely is Robert Carlyle's story, which is Begbie. I knew from the last movie that he was going to be in chaos, like his story was going to be in chaos, and that this would be largely for him, would this end up being a vengeance story? I assumed that it would, and it turns out, look, it is. They give him a little bit of sway, sort of complexity, by also giving him a chance to reconcile with his family, his son, and I think that's a really neat moment in the movie. But largely, there's a little bit of the here's a storyline with a villain and he's coming for you. And there is a lot of other stuff in this movie that's about aging as men, midlife crises, like the value of reconnecting in old friendships and how to get over hard things in our past. Like all of those are really great. And I wonder if the Begbie line is a distraction for me. That for me feels like the least sophisticated way to approach his character and lead to the climax that's otherwise a violent fight. What do you think about all that?
Well, I have a question for you first, because I think that there is an interesting element. I think when the first film ends the way it does, I think bringing Begbie in this way makes sense to me. Like, I don't think I have any issues with that aspect of Begbie. So my question for you is, do you feel part of your issue is the fact that it's not like, well, your 20 years are up and you're a free man, don't screw up again, and he's released from prison, instead of what they do where he's still violent and angry and a real problem and has to escape in order to get out? And do you feel like the fact that they had to stage a whole escape scene is the element that pushes it too far for you instead of just having him released? Or do you feel it's the entirety of his character story?
I think it's more than that. Although I will say, in terms of beats, like individual beats for Begbie, his escape is thrilling, right? Having himself get stabbed, having him stab the liver instead of someplace that was less troublesome. All of that, I think, they're fun ways to get him out in the open. I just feel like when you compare what they did with Spud, who is also like kind of a ludicrously unsophisticated character, they gave him a sophisticated out. Like his narrative of handwriting all of these memoirs is a really lovely way to wrap up his character and give him the ability to sort of resolve his story. I already had crazy Begbie in the first movie, and of all the characters, I feel like Begbie is the least changed across these two movies, across this arc, right? Simon, you could make the case that he's not, he's not much changed. Like we fill in kind of roughly right where he is. But Spud, I think, becomes a different character by the end of this movie. And Renton is absolutely dealing with different things in this movie than he was the last. And Begbie is just a maniacal force.
Well, he's still dealing with stuff. I mean, we're getting family life with him in this film, which we never had in the first film. And so that's a whole other side of his story that is brought up and memories of his father. And as you said, that final moment that he has with his wife and son, it really is quite powerful. And that actually makes for an interesting moment for him as a character, which is interesting because it shows him acknowledging that they need to move on, even though he can't. And so I didn't end up having a huge issue with that with him. I mean, to a certain extent, I can agree with you. It's like, it just pushes us into a place where we're going to have this big action, this chase, this fight at the end of the film. I don't know if I have as big a problem with it because I just feel like that's kind of where they set up Begbie at the end of the last film. He's an angry, angry, angry character. He has a lot of anger, especially toward Renton because of Renton stealing all the money and leading to him getting put in jail for all this time. And not just because of the money, but because he had nearly killed a guy and a lot of other reasons. And so I guess I just didn't end up having the issues that you did with it as far as that goes. Did it need to build to that big fight scene? Maybe that's they could have come up with something a little different than that. But I don't know. In my head, I'm like, you know what? It fits his character. We got some interesting stuff with the family. So I didn't end up having quite the issues with it, I guess.
Yeah, I hear it. I recognize that I might be an island here, but wouldn't it have been interesting if it felt at all like jail had taught him something, that he would come out of jail after all these years and have figured out a change in his life, and then be reintroduced to these old guys and discover that it turns out he hasn't changed all that much, and have to deal with the inner conflict that exists there. Like, I just feel like there's more they could do with this character than just make him a constant slugger. And I just found him tiresome. Like, I get Begbie, I get it, and everybody else is doing something that's interesting except him. It was the most predictable sort of angle that I think they could have taken, and so that's really it. And again, it's not like I have huge trouble with it. It's just, this is why it's not a 5-star movie for me, right? Like, spoiler alert. Like, this is why. It is, I wanted to see more of him struggling with change, and I never got any of that. Like, I felt like we had that one scene, and I guess what I'm saying is that's not enough.
Well, speaking of characters going through issues, one of the things that Renton is dealing with that I did want to talk about is, as a character going through stuff, you know, he kind of, when he returns to Edinburgh after having lived in Amsterdam for these past 20 years, he lies to Sick Boy about what he's been up to. And as it turns out, his wife is divorcing him. He can't have kids, likely from all the, well, I don't know, presumably, I guess it's never really stated, but I presumed it was from all of the intense drug use and everything. But he also is having some serious health issues. And we start the film off with him working out on a treadmill and then collapsing off of the treadmill in a, you know, something that I'm always afraid is going to happen to me when I'm on a treadmill. It's just one of those moments where you slip and go sliding all the way to the back of the wall behind you. But it's just one of those starts to a film. And so he clearly is going through these issues, trying to figure out what to do with his own life, trying to avoid the divorce that he's about to go through. And so, you know, and Danny Boyle has said, you know, he never intentionally wanted these films to seem like they're Renton's films. He wanted it to be kind of a story about this group. And he acknowledges that the voiceover certainly lends to making it feel like Renton's film for the first one, but he always intended it to be kind of about these 4 guys, or at least the group. And then obviously Tommy had died in that first one. But Renton in this one, his story arc, I guess his is the one that I ended up struggling with the most. Like, I found him to be interesting. His draw to Veronica I thought was interesting. His inability to figure out how to move forward with his life in the right way. He's getting pushed out of his accounting job because of this merger between these companies, and he doesn't know what else he's going to do. And he's almost 50. And it's that point in your life where you're like, if I'm pushed out of that, what do I do? And so he ends up kind of taking up with Sick Boy. And so it was an interesting angle for his story to take. But at the same time, I felt like of the stories in the film, his is the one that kind of, there are a lot of elements in it that kind of get left by the wayside. Like his whole health story, he talks about that a little bit. We start with him going through all of that and dealing with this heart issue. And all of that kind of gets dropped once we kind of go into the business dealings with Sick Boy. And that was the one that I ended up being most frustrated with, because I as much as I liked his character's journey, I felt like they somehow never quite finished giving us all of the information about his character. Did you have any issues with his story at all?
Well, and here's the question. So his heart issue, is that to you why why he fell off the treadmill?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely why. I mean, it seemed like, I don't know if it was a heart attack or, I mean, he says specifically what it is later, and I didn't write it down, but some sort of cardioid thing.
The whole thing.
Yeah, where the whole thing made it seem like he's got a heart attack. He's very concerned about this. He's gotten himself sober after these 20 years and has not been doing any drugs or anything. But he is still at this place where all of the abuse that he did to his body when he was younger has really put him in a place where he's kind of falling apart. And it seemed like a big concern about that, like this midlife crisis, this depression, these health issues. And then at the end of the film, it's like, well, okay, where are we left with? I feel like, I don't know. I felt like by the time we got to the end of the film, okay. I don't know what to take about this journey that Renton's moved on with, you know?
This is the conflict that I was faced with, exactly what you're talking about. When he falls off the treadmill, I did not think that it was related to his heart issue, because what I immediately saw was a guy who maybe was just, hyper-focused and tripped. And then we linger on him on the floor and his eyes are open, but he's not moving. And that to me was, okay, we're dealing with some severe depression right now. He's just not moving because he can't. And I thought that's kind of where we are. I didn't see just the way he fell. It didn't feel like anything heart related, mostly, I guess, because he never grabbed his heart or his arm or anything. Like, he didn't communicate it physically. So later, when he brings up this cardiac insufficiency, that his heart is borked and his wife's divorcing him and he's losing everything, it felt like his journey to me was one of like the perils, the long-term perils of living as an addict. Even an addict currently in recovery is still an addict in the world of view of this movie. And I liked that. Like, I liked the fact that he was so regularly, deeply challenged, even 20 years later, with this lifestyle that he left from, when he moved to Amsterdam. And the fact that he dips back into it and ends up living with Sick Boy and ends up having their experience. Well, there's that then. And they shoot up again. Like, all of those things I thought were really good. But to your point, whether the heart stuff, like the end the movie on the couch together, and there is no indication that he is dealing with any sort of like health trauma. So why did they need it? He's already got enough going on. Why did they need those like 2 lines in the movie that they never play again? Like, it never plays.
Well, I like that they're there. I wouldn't want them to remove it. I just would want them to give us a little more, that there is some sense of them dealing with it, Well,
that's what I'm saying. Either remove it or give us more, but where it is nothing. And I get my perspective is I already had enough with his head and midlife crisis and depression. Like, I was okay with that trauma. I didn't need the additional stuff, but as long as it's there, show me how it impacts his life.
Yeah. I really do like the actual end of the film where he goes back to live with his dad. I don't know. I assumed he was going to go back and like either live with his dad or kind of just go take care of his dad or something like that. But going back there, that hug of theirs, like coming back together after, we kind of have that beautiful, beautiful shot of the two of them sitting there.
Oh my
God.
Talking
about his mom who had passed away and her shadow is still on the wall. Wow. What
crushing
way to kind of depict that in a very heavy, touching way. But then to have him go into his room, put on the record, which he stopped earlier. Like, we see him put on the record, Lust for Life. And this time, and I suppose it speaks to earlier, he was depressed, he was going through all this stuff. He didn't have that lust for life. Here, the Lust for Life record he puts on and he starts playing it and dancing. And we get that really cool shot where it looks like his room takes off like a train and just extends, into the credits. It's really cool.
Fantastic.
I really liked that it gives us this sense, okay, maybe through all of this, he somehow has found a lust for life again and he's willing to kind of give it a try. I don't know. I guess I wanted to get a little more of that at the end. Like, what does it mean for his heart? What is he going to do about work? And maybe I'm asking for too much in a story where it's more about the character and like that the character was able to move past some of his issues. But even there, I was like, well, I just wish that I felt like I saw him moving past some of those issues. And it wasn't just, hey, we survived from Begbie and his craziness. Now let's just and Veronica, of course, made off with all the money. But hey, you know what? I'm going to go hang out with my dad. And I wish that there was just a little more sign of some of that in here.
Yes, yeah, totally. And for me, I think the ending, that last shot, I actually am a little. I guess maybe I'm more okay with the uncertainty about his character because of the way I was looking at his arc of addiction. Like the headcanon for me was about his arc of addiction, and the uncertainty at the end of the movie is he had done a lot of work to get himself out of that lifestyle. And here he was back in not only with the same people, but in the same room where he, fought off his addiction and saw the, robot baby on the ceiling and all of those things before. So that uncertainty to me, I mean, he's at a fork. Is he falling back into the exact same, train wreck that was his life before? Or is he really going to help his widower of a father and really take on some of the work of growth in the community? Is this a story of you can never go home again, or is it a story of reconciliation and growth? And I think the fact that I don't know is satisfying at the end for me, which is, I consider that a win for the movie. And the fact that, of all of these things, I don't think anybody dies in this movie. Like, we lost Kevin McKidd's character in the last movie, and we lost the baby in the last movie. This movie, we don't lose anybody to the trauma of drug use. So I don't know what to make of that. Like, I think to your point, this is a movie that's very much centered on the characters that we have and the degree to which they've overcome the trauma of their past. And I like that. And I like that it's not quite so heavy-handed in that regard. I think this movie would have been harder to watch if it were people closer to my age going through exactly what they went through in the first movie.
We do get a near suicide. Spud is in such a distraught place early in the film. He can't shake his addiction. He's ruined his chances to kind of continue any career. Everything that he does, he's always late to, and he's late for taking care of his kid with Gail, and who does return. We see Shirley Henderson return as Gail in this film, and so he's like, everything that he has, he fails at, and so he keeps returning to, as he says, his only friend who has never left him is always there, and that's heroin. He can't shake it, but he does decide, I'm going to end my life. He leaves the note. That sequence was stunning, the way that was crafted, with him putting the bag over his head, trying to kill himself, and then cutting to kind of a fantastical version of what's happening where he's in the chair and he drops off the side of the building. And then the way that we bring Mark into all of that, and we have Mark kind of landing under him to catch him and pulling. Again, going back to Danny Boyle and his brilliance in the way that he crafts these stories and knowing the balance between drama and humor. When Mark arrives to try pulling the plastic bag off of his face, only to have Spud throw up multiple times in it.
Yeah. In the bag, the bag explodes with vomit. It was
so disgusting. And I was
awful.
I was going from this is horrible to, oh my God, that just happened. In the space of a millisecond. It was hilarious. And so, but it's powerful. And so to that end, that's the closest we come to a death. And I suppose that is where Boyle and Hodge and the team decided to bring these stories. We're not at a place where we're going to be having these people overdosing, but now we're in a place where they're dealing with the psychological trauma and the baggage that they've had all these past 20 years, and how are they able to find ways to move forward?
Yes, absolutely. And to me, I loved the way they tied the characters to their past, but not just to the first movie, to their childhood. We get these flashbacks on, old film stock of these characters sitting with each other. We get, Ewan McGregor, and his great speech to Begbie about sitting with the older kid as he was a new kid in school, that these guys have been together for a long time. I think Johnny Lee Miller's Simon's conversation, his speech to Renton in the restaurant, sitting with Veronica, talking about how, we shared a needle our first time. You went first. Your blood is in my veins, man. That is, in the context of the story, a setup. But in the context of their lives, as authentic as we ever get with these guys. I mean, that story about look how far we've come is, and how it represents how much you've hurt me over the last 20 years by not being here. And that I found those just crushingly real moments in this movie that really resonated, that lift the movie out of something that it could have been.
the childhood friendships that we do see also ties into the idea of friendships over time and how these things change and evolve and shift. And, the fact that we see that all of these kids knew each other from the time they were in grade school together, including Begbie, who had been held back a few times, and he's kind of a little bit older than the rest of them. But you get this sense that they've all known each other all of this time. They've grown up together. They are kind of a core team, and things shift over time, but finding that these four have somehow continued finding ways together over, the 20 years between the two films and, the 15 years perhaps before that first film. I mean, it really says a lot to the journey that they are working on exploring.
I think that's probably it. When I talk about like my challenges with Begby's story, and I have some similar challenges with Spud's story, that so much of their stories in this movie are separate and apart from the foursome, right? They end up coming together at the end. But Spud, too, I mean, he has his delusions where he's trying to get healthy and he goes into the boxing ring. There's that great hallucinatory moment where he thinks he's raging Spud, and he turns out he gets knocked out very, very quickly. I like his story so much, but much of it is separate and apart from the other four. And one of the things that I thought was so special about the first movie is that their challenges in life are challenges that they face against each other and together. So I think that is maybe what I was looking for in this movie originally, and certainly on rewatch, that I was just hoping for more of the movie to spend time dealing with the characters together. To that end, Simon and Renton together was great. Like, much of their story is together, and I liked it. I liked revisiting Johnny Lee Miller as a performer and Simon as a character, and dealing with, like, watching him expunge so much of the rage that he's carried for the last 20 years was a great experience.
I really enjoy his journey. Sometimes I was like, is there, like, where am I landing with him? Is he actually still working to betray Renton by the time we get to the end? Or what point is he giving that up? And there was a little bit of a struggle with that, because that was something I felt like, I don't know if I'm completely buying into where we're going with things, because I feel like, that relationship, like he has so much anger toward Renton that I never quite felt like they gave me the final resolution that I wanted between the two of them.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. To your point, though, I did really enjoy their time together. Even a scene like, as much as it in the end doesn't allow for perhaps other elements that might be more important as far as some of the other characters' development and everything, but you still get a scene like when they go into the 1690 pub and they do that whole riff on, that was, kick all the Catholics out or whatever, that whole song that they, sing off the spur of the moment.
Really funny.
Hilarious scene. Yeah, it doesn't quite, like, that probably could have been cut because it didn't necessarily give us too much other than the two of them figuring out how to do something on the spur of the moment, and kind of just a character moment for the two of their friendship. But it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, that scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think that builds toward that the whole reconciliation arc between the two of them, and I think it presents the case for maybe why Simon ends up making the decisions he does in regard to Renton, like putting Begby on the case and trying to send Begby to Amsterdam. Like, that was a great little moment, right? It cements the fact that Simon is struggling. And I think for me, Johnny Lee Miller's portrayal of that struggle is strong. It is not necessarily explicitly resolved when they're sitting on the couch together at the end of the movie, but I take it as writ that the fact that they're sitting on the couch together at the end of the movie is enough.
I suppose you're right. It would be interesting to have a little more. I guess we're getting enough character beats to allow us to make our own decisions with the characters, and that's perhaps what Boyle and Hodge wanted to do. I felt like the first film had been a little more explicit with stuff, and this film I feel like it's a little looser. I guess it's not a huge issue, but it did, as you said, this one I don't love quite as much as the first film.
Yeah. What do you make of revisiting Diane's character? That felt shoehorned, but it does give us one of the wonderful ironic lines of the movie, Renton, she's too young for you, which I think is actually well placed. What'd you think of just seeing her showing up here?
I was very disappointed by how little we had of Diane in the film. It made sense in context of the story. She went to a totally different type of school, came from a totally different life, ended up on a path that made a lot of sense probably for her lot in life, and so I like that journey. I like seeing where she ended up. They had to come up with a way to bring her in, and I suppose this worked. But yeah, it's just like I felt like it was one of those, this is a moment from a legacy sequel where we're like, well, we just got to write her in some way. Okay, hey, she's the attorney that Sick Boy needs at one point. Sure. And to that end, it did feel a little easy.
It felt stunt casting to me. Like, just Kelly Macdonald has done a lot of wonderful things. She was in this movie like all these other guys. We have to put her back in here somewhere. Because she got such a bit part, it was hard. And yet, no one else, no other character could have delivered that line. She's too young for you. And I thought that was a tie to the original movie that I enjoyed. I enjoyed that, there's a bloomin' onion of messages in that line for her to say to him. So I liked it.
Yeah, true. Something we haven't really talked about is kind of the behind the scenes and the relationship between Boyle and McGregor that had been sullied early on in their careers. They did this film, they did Shallow Grave, this film, and A Life Less Ordinary together. And then Boyle moved on to do The Beach, and Ewan McGregor had kind of fully, I don't know if it was his expectation, I don't know if they had prior conversations about it, but basically was expecting to be the lead of that film. And then it turns out Boyle had cast Leonardo DiCaprio, and it kind of broke their friendship. And they hadn't talked for quite a long time. And there was a lot of conversations about, would they be able to work together again in order to make this work? And they did. It was quite a bit of conversation in the conversations when they started, after Porno was released, and the conversations were like, are they going to make a sequel to this? How is that going to happen? And it was brought up a number of times by people saying, these two had come together and they had been working on reconciliation and finding a way past that. And so it was nice to know, but I don't know who else was having issues, but I believe that somebody else had said that there were others in the cast who had had a rocky road, but they had also reconciled. So it makes me wonder, what sort of fallout had come from relationships in this film that, I don't know. I guess it's a thing of time. And to your point, I guess about Begbie, maybe that's what you're looking for, is that passage of time allowing a person to kind of slowly move past some of these issues.
Yes, Andy, yes. This is why we're friends after all these years. You get me. I actually think
I'm not saying I agree with you, but I understand you on your point.
But at least you understand and don't lampoon it. Like, I feel like that's what I'm looking for. And when you look at the kerfuffle about the beach in particular, it was the fact that it was not, it's so easy to hear that story and think, oh, Ewan McGregor's upset because he didn't get a part. But that wasn't really the story. The fact was he really had the understanding that he was getting the part and found out through other means that he wasn't going to be in the movie, not from Boyle. And it was Boyle who came to him on bended knee and said, look, man, we were totally disrespectful to you. We did you wrong, and we're sorry. I am sorry about that. And went about rebuilding that relationship and talking about, like, he's spoken so publicly, Boyle has, about how incredibly generous of spirit and energy Ewan McGregor is, and how much regret he has that he, misused that energy by, mishandling that relationship on the beach. So I don't know. Like, I feel like that is a lot of the heart in this movie, is like these guys coming to terms with the wrongs that they have done to each other. No one is innocent necessarily in this movie. I guess maybe Spud is innocent in the movie, but not even really, because he took the money from the first movie and didn't tell anybody about it. And that was, in their eyes, another way that he wronged them. Like, no one is innocent in this movie. And I think that it comes from their understanding as adults, having lived through wronging each other and wronging others and having to come to terms with that.
And he takes money at the end of this movie, although not directly,
right.
But he does.
Not
he
directly,
does
right.
have Veronica send money to Gail to take care of her and his son.
Does that absolve him of the guilt, though? Does the fact that he has it sent to his, former spouse and child?
I suppose, because he knows, I'm doing it for somebody else. I'm not doing it because if I did it, I would just shoot it up in my veins.
Yeah. I do love that he has the whole, lost art of forgery under his belt. The fact that he was able to use this, that he could chip and pin, totally did away with his ability to forge signatures. But here he could forge some signatures and make off with the money. Yeah.
And that's one of those things where, I mean, inevitably, I suppose they're going to need to come up with new character traits in a situation like this. But it did feel like, this is something that they came up with for this sequel because they just need to have this handy tool for Spud to be able to wield at some point. It was never talked about in the first film, but we're going to come up with it here because it's a plot point. And that to me was one issue that I'm like, yeah, all right, it's written in there. I'll let them get away with it, but it does feel like, just coming up with something specifically that's an easy way out that was never brought up in the first film.
Yep. No, I'll agree with that. It's fun. I like it in this context of this movie, but you have a good point.
Yeah.
Can you just talk just briefly about your thoughts on the look of the film, and particularly in comparison to the first?
Yeah, Anthony Dodd Mantle was the DP on this one, and I enjoyed, somebody who's shot plenty of films, a lot of the Dogma 95 sorts of films, has a handle on them, worked with Danny Boyle on 28 Days Later and Millions and Slumdog Millionaire, 127 Hours, Trance, so certainly has been kind of working with him since those early days. But I think that the film looked clean and crisp. There was a lot of play in the film, but I didn't feel the play was quite as special as it was in the first film. Like, we had some periodically when something was happening, we would do those freeze frames again. And there were times when it was a freeze frame, like when Begbie attacks the what do you call an attorney over in the UK? I know it's not
solicitor,
an attorney, but
barrister.
His solicitor, right? His solicitor who's helping him at the prison, talking to him at the beginning about, are you going to push that little yellow button? Like that whole sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then he leaps over the table and it's a freeze frame as the sirens go off. Like, that is straight out of the first film and it works well. Over the course of the film, there are periodically, like in the middle of something happening, there's a brief freeze frame and then the action continues just to kind of highlight something. And I found those didn't work quite as well for me. There was a lot of play. Like, I liked it when Renton had to walk up all the stairs to Spud's house because the elevator was broken, and you see the outside of the building, and it's like the elevator numbers are just kind of going up the side of it to the 13th floor. Like, there were moments that Boyle was really playing around with it, and it worked well. But there was also sometimes play that I guess didn't quite connect or didn't click into the story as much as it did in the first film.
What'd you think about the projection? Like, we've already talked about the shadows, they used that trick a couple of times, which and I loved it. I loved it so much. There's another later where the car, Renton and Simon and Veronica are in the car and they're doing Snapchat filters and making faces, and on the outside of the car there's a projection of history of the past, like, going by. I think that was one of those neat tricks demonstrating time and grief passing. Like, here's the fact that it's in motion and a projection and of the past. I thought it was really lovely. What do you think of those kinds of things?
Yeah, that sort of play where they're coming up with an interesting way to kind of incorporate the multiple timelines into this story, I thought were special. And it was an interesting way to kind of portray those scenes and to have them play out. And even where sometimes, like, you had Spud when he came out, and this was, I think, earlier in the film, but he walks down a street and then he sees, and the way that they chose to portray his memory is he sees himself and Renton running from the cops in, like, from that first film at the beginning when we see them running. He's watching that now play out in front of him as if he's reliving that moment, but it's just also playing out like a memory. And so there were a lot of those sorts of things, the way that they chose to incorporate elements like that. I found that they always worked. I really liked the way that Boyle was bringing those into the story.
Yeah, me too. I also like the way he played with video with the blackmailing. I mean, we haven't talked about the fact that Sick Boy is a blackmailer, cocaine addict now, and a blackmailer, and that's his relationship with Veronica. Is he would use her, she would go have sex with unsuspecting people in this massage parlor, and then he would use footage of that to blackmail them. I like that angle for him. That felt like, if anything, here's a guy who, it really leans in on the fact that he was able to get out of the heroin part, but not out of, the hometown and the crime and
drugs, crime.
Drugs.
He's growing pot. He's kind of got everything.
In contrast to, Spud, who never got out of the heroin, really.
Right.
And so that worked for me. But I'm with you. I loved the way they play with video and monitors and the cameras and the way, those things are overlaid on top of one another. That's another set of visual tricks that worked for the character for me.
Yeah. I also really liked the soundtrack. Again, Boyle taps into strong music to kind of click in with what we're seeing here. And I felt it was kind of a nice mix of music, some older tunes, some more recent ones. And I just found that the music was, it fits this world. And I like what he does with music in these two films.
There's a great sequence when everybody's at the bar, right? The bar they used to go to. And now it's really, really changed. And Begbie is there. And I love the way Carlisle plays this. He takes a drink of his beer and he's watching them dance to a modern song, and they're all dancing in motion, hopping up and down. And the look on his face is like, I can't. I'm a stranger in a strange land. I don't know how to relate to this. And that leads him going to the bathroom and being side by side in stalls with Renton. And they have that great moment where they recognize voices together. But I just love, like, it's the bar, it's the club that, for me, represents so much of the passage of time through music and through these cultural events of the dance. And I thought that was really nice. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it really was.
You got anything else?
Yeah, I think that's about it. So, we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Alex Grohl, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds the stats for the awards and numbers at d-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. Sequels and remakes, Andy? Are we going to get another one?
Believe it or not, Danny Boyle has been discussing the possibility of a third film, although he's kind of called it a spin-off, focusing on Begby, based on a different book by Irvine Welsh called The Blade Artist, which also follows Begby, and now he's going by Jim Francis, working as an artist in California, and goes to Scotland to attend the funeral of his murdered son, and then he and his wife come to terms with his dark past. That's kind of the synopsis of the book. Interesting that they are looking at doing that. Robert Carlyle is totally excited about doing it, although, as Danny Boyle said, it would be definitely more of a spin-off. It didn't sound like he was that excited about actually doing the spinoff himself. I don't know if he would just kind of produce it and find other people. He said if he were to return, he would rather do an actual true sequel instead of a spinoff because he really does enjoy these 4 characters. But Irvine Welsh has hinted of maybe doing a Trainspotting TV series. And Robert Carlyle actually confirmed that the Begbie spinoff series is actually in development. So who knows? I mean, it sounds like, I didn't hear anything from anybody other than Danny Boyle, Robert Carlyle, or Irvine Welsh that they were talking about stuff. But I don't know. I'm surprised, actually, that they are seriously kind of considering doing more stuff with these characters in these worlds. So I guess we'll see, but it certainly piqued my curiosity.
Me too. I can't say I won't see it. I'd be very, very curious, if particularly putting Begby in a principal character role, like making him our protagonist. I think gives us some interesting opportunity, and particularly you talk about reconciling his dark past with his wife. Time passes. What happens?
Well, and that his son gets murdered. That. It's like, wow, okay, some interesting things have happened in his life.
Yeah. How'd it do at award season?
Not as well as the first one, but it still had 6 wins with 8 other nominations. Over at BAFTA Awards Scotland, again, the Scotland specific, it had 3 wins. Best Actor, Ewan Bremner. Obviously, everybody loved the return to Spud. Best Director also, and Best Film. Also, Ewan McGregor and Robert Carlyle were both nominated for Best Actor, but they lost to Ewan Bremner. At the British Screenwriters Awards, the film was nominated for Best Script, but lost to A United Kingdom. Interestingly, a last one here, the Golden Trailer Awards nominated it for Best Trailer Bite for a feature film. I was trying to figure out what the heck is a trailer bite. They label it, I did find the actual booklet for the Golden Trailer Awards from the year, from 2018, and they label it as an Insta, Vine, GIF, Bites, or Blinks. So whatever a blink is, I'm not sure where you watch Blinks.
Probably Quibi.
But that's what a trailer bite is. I guess it's a piece of a trailer that you use in those capacities. But anyway, so it's almost like a mini trailer. It was nominated for that, and theirs was called The Vault, and they lost to the Lego Batman movie. For that film.
Oh.
I couldn't figure out how to watch these either. The other films that were nominated were Life. Remember that film with Jake Gyllenhaal? And then Sausage Party. Oh, in Life, theirs was called Mouse. And I'm assuming that's when the little alien takes the mouse. In Sausage Party, it was called Gum. T2 Trainspotting is called The Vault. The Lego Batman movie is called Gotham Cribs Snapchats. And Transformers The Last Night, it was called Microfiche. I really want to watch these just so I can figure out exactly what are these people doing as trailer bites. But unfortunately, I can't find them anywhere.
All right. Well, that leads us to the box office.
Well, Boyle's delayed follow-up to his original breakout hit cost $18 million to make, or $21.9 million in today's dollars. That is more than 3.5 times what the first film cost. I guess it's inflation and all those big actor salaries he's paying now. Who knows? The movie premiered in the UK January 27th, 2019, then rolled out worldwide February 10th, with a limited release finally in the US March 17th, where it opened opposite the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast, as well as the Belko Experiment. Opening on just 5 screens, it landed in 29th place. They'd expand the number of screens to 331 eventually, but it never got higher than 15th place at the box office. It went on to earn $2.4 million domestically and $39.7 million internationally for a total gross of $51.4 million in today's dollars. That's just over 2.5 times less than what the first one made. But hey, it's still a profit, landing with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $250,000. We'll see if they end up returning to this well or not.
Well, I'm glad to have returned to the well. I like it. I had a great time with it. It doesn't completely stand up to the first movie, but I did have a good enough time. Coming back to these 4 characters that I have to tell you, I'm provoked about what a trilogy would look like. T3? Do they even do that? Is that where they would go? T3 Trainspotting?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm into it. Had a good time.
Yeah, I'm glad that we watched it. I enjoyed returning to spend time with these characters, and I would be curious to see a return to it. Even if they don't, I'm fine. But, if they did, I would be curious to see what they came up with.
Me too.
All right, well, we will be back for our ratings, but first, here's the trailer for next week's movie kicking off our new series, John Wick.
I'm up.
You like that, huh?
Nice ride.
Thanks.
How much?
Excuse me.
How much for the car?
She's not for sale.
You have good day, sir.
Daisy. I lost everything. That dog was a final gift from my dying wife.
Jonathan, you got out once. You dip so much as a pinky back into this pond, you may find something reaching out to pull you back in.
It's personal.
Where'd you get that car?
What does it matter?
It's not what you did, son. It's who you did it to.
Nobody?
That nobody is John Wick.
You working again? No, just sorting some stuff out.
Task your crew.
How many?
As many as you have.
Hey, John. I thought I let myself in.
People keep asking if I'm back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
I'm not afraid of John Wick.
Uh-huh. How good's your laundry?
No one's that good.
I thought not.
Letterboxd, Andy, you know Letterboxd. It's our favorite social media network for movie lovers. And we put our reviews, our film diary, our loves and likes and stars and hearts all over at letterboxd.com. We are all updated. We all have gone ahead and forked over a few bucks to Letterboxd to get rid of ads and support the great Kiwi team doing all the work, keeping up the site and making it fast and awesome and free of nonsense that you might find elsewhere. And you could do that too if you decide to upgrade to Pro or Patron. Just use the code NEXTREEL at checkout, or we've set up a little URL for you. If you visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd, it will whisk you over to the sign up page with 20% off already applied. 20% off Pro or Patron upgrades. What are you going to do, Andy?
The last film I gave 4.5 stars. I really do enjoy that one quite a bit. I feel like with this one, there were some issues. I still really connected with it, enjoyed the characters, what they were doing with it. I'm going to say 4 stars and a heart.
Me too, Andy. 4 stars and a heart. I feel like I have some quibbles. I have just a couple of quibbles, but not terrible troubles. And I'm living for 4 solid stars.
Fantastic. Well, as Pete said, don't forget, visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd to get your Patron or Pro membership. It works for renewals as well. And you can head over to our website, thenextreel.com/membership, and you can learn about our membership plans where you can get early access to shows, member bonus episodes, extra content, all that good stuff. So what did you think about T2 Trainspotting? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community where we will be talking about it this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Andy, Letterboxd giveth.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
I've got a short one. I've got a 3-star from Jasmine. Actually asks a question now I'm not going to be able to let go of.
Oh.
Jasmine says, is Danny Boyle really trying to tell me that Sick Boy still bleaches his hair 20 years later? Not only does he still bleach his hair, we actually see him bleaching his hair in this movie.
That was actually very important to Boyle. That he actually, there was, I saw, I think also in the IMDb trivia where somebody said that Johnny Lee Miller offered to actually shave his head to look older, but Danny Boyle insisted that he retain his iconic blonde hair.
That was the right call for that character. Absolutely the right call. But I think it's fascinating. Like, I only get that in hindsight. I think that's a little bit of Boyle genius.
Well, there's a person who never has been able to move past his youth, you know?
Yeah. Right.
As
right.
Veronica says at some point, you guys are all just, it's all nostalgia. So.
Exactly. What else do we have? What do you got?
All right. Well, I've also got a 3-star. This one's by, Dia, who has this to say. Spotted a lot more trains this time.
Especially in that closing sequence. The trains on his wallpaper. There's millions of trains in there as those are going by.
So many trains. So many trains.
Thanks, Letterboxd. It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material from all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links support the show at no extra cost to you.
In Season 12, the focus was big franchises and series. We covered both Paddington films, adapted from the beloved children's book character created by Michael Bond.
Oh, I love those films so much.
Hugh Grant is perfect.
For our Pitch Perfect series, the first film was adapted from Mickey Rapkin's nonfiction book about collegiate a cappella competitions.
It's like a short story of my life, literally. I lived college a cappella.
Sing it, brother.
I lived college a cappella.
I didn't mean literally.
You know who you're talking to, right? The Twilight Saga dominated the season with 5 films adapted from Stephenie Meyer's vampire romance novels, Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, and the 2 Breaking Dawn parts.
Dominated with awkward romance and nonsense logic is more like it.
That too.
Another Thin Man brought us back to Dashiell Hammett's only Thin Man sequel based on other Hammett material, The Farewell Murder, that wasn't just based on the characters from the first film.
We talked about Trainspotting and its sequel, T2 Trainspotting, adapted from Irvine Welsh's novels.
I hate the sequel's name.
I do too.
And the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy adapted from J.R.R. Tolkien's epic fantasy series.
Love these.
Extended editions all the way, baby.
Plus, all the Mission Impossible films based on the 1960s TV series.
And we've still got at least one more to go.
Members got to hear us chat about The Hustler and The Color of Money, adapted from Walter Tevis's books.
Get all of these books and more at our Originals page, thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read from the movies we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals.